Hello, my name is Veronika Solopova, and I'm a PhD student in Freie Universität Berlin under supervision of Professor Dr. Christoph Bensmüller and Professor Dr. Tim Landgraf. And here I would like to present you our paper under the title The Evolution of Pro-Kremlin Propaganda from a Machine Learning and Linguistics Perspective. Here I will show you our data set, our main experiments and results, introduce some interesting error analysis and explainability results for our models, and finally present the actual differences we found between the 2022 and 2023 data sets. So propaganda is manipulative, usually state-sponsored content promoting certain political agenda. You can see that there is no mention of the idea of truth and lie here. It's not about the truthfulness of the arguments and sometimes not even about the validity. It is indeed about manipulation, non-neutrality, and that's why propaganda partially coincides with fake news. A lot of news which we can consider propaganda are indeed fake news, but not all fake news are propaganda. Propaganda can say the truth, but not the whole truth. It can use valid arguments, but not name any counter-arguments, and so on. So here in this study, we focus also on Russian state-sponsored propaganda. And this paper I present here is actually a follow-up study to the one we had where we used two algorithms, BERT model based on transformer technology and attention mechanism explaining which I think is not most important for this presentation, and a classical support vector machine algorithm, which we fed with linguistic features of propaganda we collected from the research and glossary of manipulative terms from a Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation. In this follow-up study, we want to determine if these algorithms trained on the data from 2022 will work on data from 2023, and how much the propaganda has evolved and how we can determine that. We scraped data from many a newspaper, from Ukrainian, Russian, Romanian, French, and English-speaking media. We also collected Telegram news and Ukrainian, from Ukrainian and Russian Telegram. We annotated them without actual labeling, using source as a label, meaning we based it on journalistic investigations list provided by Ukrainian Ministry of Digitalization, proxy servers that flag sources as those having fake news. And here should come a disclaimer. It's not that we separate pro-Russian propaganda from neutral news. Having analyzed our data, we came to the conclusion that there is almost no neutral news, especially about war, and especially at the time that we were collecting data in 2022. We often say that we learned to separate pro-Kremlin and pro-Western stance. So in 2023, we collected a much smaller data set of 1.4K. And to make our 2022 test sets comparable, we made a random sampling of this 2022 data set to have it much smaller. Here we can see that both models successfully predicted our classes, and in case of BERT model, there is even slightly better results due to lower false negative rate. Both classifiers are more prone to false positive, however. We see that SVM model has slightly more problems with new texts. What we did is we plotted our categories distribution over the positives, true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives rates. And what we saw is actually that many important features for 2022 to predict pro-Kremlin propaganda now have very similar distributions between false positives and true positives. So these may be the categories that actually changed in this year. Well, previous study, we looked in the coefficients of importance of the SVM model. This time we decided to try to understand a bit better what BERT predictions mean and how they come up. And we call this a simplified attribution method. We segmented text so that the first segment is the first token of the text, while every next segment will have another text, next word unmasked until the last segment becomes a full text again. We classify each of them, and if a new next word change prediction value or its probability a lot, it was recovered into either the list of words inducing pro-Kremlin or pro-Western prediction. We analyzed extracted lists with linguistic feature extraction script to see if there are some similarities in how experts and BERT chooses propaganda features. We saw that adjectives, abstract nouns, proper nouns, high modality words, and words with strong negative or strong positive connotation are also easily identifiable categories in BERT, while high amount of reporting words is also typical for pro-Russian stance as well as for our SVM. Thus, the first finding is that BERT identifies the names of the sources appearing in the text and connects them to the prediction classes. For instance, ZUA, the name of Romanian tabloid, is one of the most frequent words for that we extracted for Romanian words which change prediction into propaganda. And in contrast, active news, a neutral Romanian news outlet, always changed prediction value into pro-Western stance. Even more, in 2022, French data, a link to Russian RIA news, also was accurately determinant for propaganda class. In 2023, pro-Kremlin propaganda in Ukrainian news, everything will focus on the word Putin, while predicting pro-Western news are words Ukraine and Ukrainians. In Ukrainian, pro-Western news was connected to national institutions, such as government, minister, and state are also very significant. In the Russian language, a keyword most reliable for predicting of liberal side are actually orks, the way how Ukrainians call Russian soldiers. Also, some glossary words were used by BERT model. For example, the word war, special operation, DNR, LNR, negotiations, and Kremlin. Finally, we decided to compare how the two data sets 2022 and 2023 differ according to our linguistic features and terms for each language and stance. We used z-score normalized averages because we could not use medians, which would be usually advisable in this case because most of our medials equal to 0, and this complicates testing. We applied Mann-Whitney U-test as our values are mostly non-normally distributed. So Russian Telegram saw the most evolution. For example, Kiev regime term became a lot more frequent, as well as the West. It also makes more claims and uses more assertive words, adverbs, and other high modality words. Russian state outlets, on the other hand, started using considerably less special military operation wording, but also dropped the rhetoric of the Republic of Crimea, LNR, and DNR, which the Russian Federation annexed and now considers its own regions rather than independent republics. So this is naturally that it doesn't name them this way anymore. It also speaks less of negotiations, sanctions, genocide, fake news, and Belarusia. Russian liberal news did not change its style and narrative, nor did English-speaking French pro-Western and French pro-Kremlin news. Romanian pro-Kremlin data became less emotional. We can observe a drop in most negative and positive emotions, especially in emotion of trust. There can be seen more abstract nouns and conditional clauses, which are more typical for pro-Western narrative, but also relative clauses and claims, which can be usually associated with pro-Kremlin news. On the other hand, Western Romanian media has much more negative sentiment than at the beginning of 2022, where is more anger and fear, and they talk more about the deceased and the attacks, calling out Kremlin more directly. Ukrainian pro-Western news became more neutral, as negative and positive emotions calm down, particularly the emotion of trust. There is less mention of genocide, embargo, negotiations, and sanctions, which were more important topics for 2022. A rise in the clause of time, adverbs, and especially proper nouns is significant, reflecting mostly the discussion about armament supplies. In Ukrainian Telegram, on the contrary, there is more anger, awaiting, and sadness. The high effect size for the keyword fake reflects Ukrainian efforts to debunk Kremlin propaganda. Stylistically, the language possesses more adjectives and subordinate clauses of reason, purpose, and condition. The potentially pro-Kremlin news in Ukrainian, which seems to have partially changed their allegiance, show more emotion of trust and fear. It is in general more expressive with higher numbers of adverbs. It uses Russian manipulative term Belarusia term, but also Belarus, but leans more towards the latter. So to conclude, both models accurately identify a pro-Western stance and generally draw good results. The BERT model is prone to attributing class according to the news source. The rise in temporal clauses and abstract nouns in pro-Western stance may explain the higher misclassification rate of the SVM. The word war appeared highly predictive for both SVM and BERT. A liberal Russian 2023 news was identified as pro-Kremlin propaganda by both classifiers. Meanwhile, pro-Kremlin Romanian sources and Ukrainian news survey in 2023 became more neutral. Pro-Ukrainian media focuses on Ukraine. Pro-Kremlin Ukrainian news focus on Putin.